Shalom, everyone. It's Nathaniel. We're going to continue with our Sunday Bible study. Last week, we took a slight break or pause from the regular study. We are in the book of Nehemiah, and we're looking at rebuilding the wall as well as the temple. And so that is a part of our theme that we have been dealing with since the beginning of the year, and we will continue with that theme throughout this year. As always, as we enter into the study, we're encouraged that 2 Timothy 2:15 wants us to study to show ourselves approved unto the Most High, workmen who need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And in addition to that, we know that all scripture is God-breathed and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the person of the Most High may be complete, thoroughly furnished unto every good work. So we have been in the book of Nehemiah. Before we got into Nehemiah, we were in Ezra, and we're looking at a period of time in the history of the children of Israel and their relationship with the Most High, where they have been in exile for 70 years because of rebellion and disobedience and civil war and all kinds of negative things that were happening, worshiping other gods. They found themselves in Babylon, and once they were in Babylon, they also found themselves on the receiving end of a takeover of Babylon from the Medes and Persians. And so by the time we get to Ezra, King Cyrus of Persia has taken the land that Babylon had, and was also the person that the captives of the southern kingdom, which was the part of Israel that included Jerusalem and Judea, and the Yahudim, or the Jews, and the Levites and those who were living in that area. They were in exile. And so when we pick up at Nehemiah, in the book of Nehemiah, we know that they have now been given permission to go back into the land, because the prophecy said that they would be in captivity for 70 years. And they're at the end of that time. And so now they're beginning to come back into the land. Nehemiah is one of the three people that we have been talking about. The first one was Zerubbabel. He led the first group. Ezra, which the book of Ezra is named after him, he led the group that was primarily concerned with what was going on with the temple and the things of the temple, which had to do with the word of the Most High. And then Nehemiah, who also had a burden from the Most High to go back into the land, and the Most High told him to repair the wall and the gates of the wall. So Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, is talking about that. So that's just a brief background. What we're going to do is we're going to read Nehemiah chapter 6. So I'll go ahead and get that and pull it up on the screen, and we'll go ahead and get started. Nehemiah chapter 6, and we're going to read most of this, okay? This is the English Standard Version. Now when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arab and the rest of our enemies heard that I had built the wall, and that there was no breach left in it, although up to that time I had not set up the doors in the gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent to me, saying, Come, let us meet together at Haphirim, in the plain of Ono. But they intended to do me harm. And I sent messengers to them, saying, I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? And they sent to me 4 times in this way, and I answered them in the same manner. In the same way, Sanballat for the fifth time sent his servant to me with an open letter in his hand. In it was written, "It is reported among the nations," and Geshem also says it, "that you and the Jews intend to rebel. That is why you are building the wall. And according to these reports, you wish to become their king. And you have also set up prophets to proclaim concerning you in Jerusalem, there is a king in Judah, and now the king will hear of these reports. So now come and let us take counsel together." Then I sent to him, saying, "No such thing as you say have been done, no such things, as you say have been done, for you are inventing them out of your own mind. For they all wanted to frighten us, thinking their hands will drop from the work and it will not be done. But now, O Elohim, strengthen my hands." Now, when I went into the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, son of Mehetabel, who was confined to his home, he said, "Let us meet together in the house of Yahuwah within the temple. Let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. They are coming to kill you by night." But I said, should such a man as I run away? And what man such as I could go into the temple and live? I will not go in. And I understood and saw that Yahuwah had not sent him, but he had pronounced the prophecy against me, because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. For this purpose he was hired, that I should be afraid and act in this way and sin. And so they could give me a bad name in order to taunt me. Remember Tobiah and Sanballat, O my God, according to these things that they did, and also the prophetess Noadiah and the rest of the prophets who wanted to make me afraid. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month of Elul, in 52 days. And when all of our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem, for they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our Elohim. Moreover, in those days, the nobles of Judah sent many letters to Tobiah, and Tobiah's letters came to them. For many in Judah were bound by oath to him, because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, the son of Arah, and his son Jehohanan had taken the daughter of Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, as his wife. Also they spoke of his good deeds in my presence and reported my words to him. And Tobiah sent letters to make me afraid. I'm going to deal with these verses first, just for clarity's sake. So, in essence, what he's saying in verses 16 through 19, once the enemies heard that the work had been completed, then they fell out of esteem of the people around them. And some of those people were the affluent of Judah, and Judah being the tribe of Judah. And so they sent letters to Tobiah, and Tobiah's letters came to them because they were actually bound by an oath to Tobiah, who was working for the enemy. So that this is in essence what it's saying. So, there had been, as they often would do, there had been a marriage of convenience or a political marriage, and they were bound in that way through to those who were actually enemies of the Most Highest people, rather than being of the Most Highest people. So that's what that's talking about. So what we're going to do now is spend a little time with a couple of slides, so that we can bring out some things that have just been pointed out in the scriptures themselves. So let me pull that up. Okay, so we left off. This is the last slide from last week, so I'm not going to rehearse this again. But if you remember, we took a break. We stepped back, and we're looking at specifically the Dead Sea Scrolls, but also what Ezekiel was saying in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it was all in relationship to what is going on in the Ukraine, or it was all not in relationship to what is going on in the Ukraine, which is one of the reasons I brought it up, because although Ukraine is in prophecy, it's not in prophecy the way that many people believe that it is. So I don't think that this is the Gog Magog war that's about to happen, for a number of reasons that I talked about last week, and we're not going to go back into that. But we are going to continue with Nehemiah chapter 6. There was a lot in that chapter, and this has to do with how Nehemiah chapter 6 dovetails itself, or actually tracks itself with the goings on that the Most High has his people dealing with during our time that we're on the earth. So a couple of things that we want to bring out from Nehemiah chapter 6 that we just read, and it has to do with our enemies. We, as the people of the book, we as the people who have surrendered ourselves to Yeshua, who believe in what the scriptures say about his people, his not only his bloodline descendants, but the bloodline descendants, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but also those who have received the blessing of the gospel of Yeshua and have been grafted in to the tree that the Most High planted. The reason I'm emphasizing that is because when Nehemiah is speaking, or when Ezekiel was speaking, or many of the other prophets were speaking, Isaiah comes to mind as well. Israel is spoken about as a vine or a planting of the Most High, whether it's a vine, whether it's the fig tree, whether it's the olive tree. It's the Most High who has planted this tree called Israel, and that tree was to blossom and bloom and bless the rest of the world. Okay, and so when we read Nehemiah, what we're actually reading is that they are at the end of the punishment, if you will, that they had to endure because they weren't being that tree, and so a lot of what we talked about in Ezra, what we're talking about in Nehemiah, has to do with coming back to where the Most High wanted them to be all along. Now, this was a specific location in the land of Canaan. In the land of Canaan, a specific place, Jerusalem, and in Jerusalem, a specific building, the temple. That's what all of these things are about, because around the temple was this wall, and that's what Nehemiah was charged to go back and rebuild. And as we had done the study and continue to do the study, we understood that the wall is the hedge of protection around the vineyard, or around the garden of the Most High. In the garden of the Most High, that's where his word is. Okay. So Jerusalem is more than a city. Jerusalem actually contains the word of the Most High, which means that that is the center of the world. And just because the people who were populating the center of the world, from heaven's perspective, just because they were living in rebellion and disobedience, that does not change the will of the Most High for those people. And so this is what Nehemiah understands. Excuse me. This is what Nehemiah was repenting for and of as an individual, but more importantly, as a member of this nation. So in repentance, he is the one that's going back into the land to reestablish. Now, okay, while all of that is going on, and he has the vision from the Most High, just as Ezra had the vision from the Most High, just as Zerubbabel had the vision from the Most High, and as they carried out the vision, they were carrying out the vision in the midst of the enemy's camp, because once Jerusalem had been overrun, the enemies of the nation took over that land, and decimated it. Okay, so it wasn't just the Babylonians that did that. It wasn't uh, um, just those whose armies came, but the people surrounding them were their enemies also, and they're still there to this day. That dynamic is still going on. So as we open the lesson this evening, we open the lesson with the understanding that Nehemiah is going back into hostile territory that is being populated by his enemies, and they're on his land. So in order to do the work that the Most High has for him to do, he has to do that in the midst of trouble and trial and threat of death by his enemies. I'm emphasizing that because that's what's happening today. The Most High, in reestablishing the work of his people, has given instructions to his people in the form of repair the breach, rise up and build. And all of that is being done in real time with real enemies shooting live ammunition at the Most High's people in 2022. So that's how we're studying this. So Nehemiah chapter 6 brings out some very important points. The first point is the enemy that already exists. When the enemy sees that there's some modicum of success among the Most High's people, they try to draw the Most High's people away from the work that they're doing. They try to draw them into their own area where they have the advantage, the tactical advantage, so that they can stop the work. And by stopping the work, that also means killing the enemy, which would be the Most High's people. So that's what Sanballat and the other people were trying to do. They were trying to lure Nehemiah away from the work of building rebuilding the wall and the gates. Now, they were doing that at this particular point in time because Nehemiah and those who came with him came with the understanding that they were at war. They didn't come in peace. They came to establish or reestablish what the Most High had done. And as we deal with where things are in this day and time, this is not a time of peace. As much as we, especially those who are like myself, who are naturally peacekeepers, this isn't the time for peace. This is the time of war. And so in this time of war, we are charged to go back into territory that's supposed to belong to us. And that's what was going on with Nehemiah. And so we have to do so with our eyes wide open. We have to do so already strapped, and we have to do so being ready to act as warriors in this time, because this is not peacetime. This is wartime. Okay, so Nehemiah hears these people talking, but he also knows who they are. He understands, you are not my friends, you are not my allies, you are my enemies. And so what the enemy does when you don't listen to the enemy is they keep bringing the same message over and over again. So the enemy is persistent. If you remember what happened with Yeshua and Satan in the wilderness, after Satan tempted Yeshua, those 4 times, it says he left him for a season. When he left him for a season, it wasn't because he was defeated. He was just waiting for a more opportune time to continue to do what he was trying to do, which was to stop Yeshua from fulfilling his mission. So, as always, Yeshua is our standard by which we should be measuring ourselves and our activities. Okay, so the enemy uses, first of all, the enemy tries to lure you into a place where they have the advantage, and that again is going on today. They're very persistent. They keep saying the same thing over and over again, hoping to wear you down so that you will do what they want you to do, which is to give up the work that the Most High gave you to do. And if that doesn't work, then they threaten to go to higher authorities. And when they go to the higher authorities, they could be telling the truth, they could be telling a lie, but the purpose is to stop you. The prime example in American culture would be the FBI's COINTEL program. Their job was to make sure that a Black Messiah did not emerge. And so that's what they did. The war that they waged, specifically the Black Messiah that they waged it against, was Martin Luther King Jr. And they used these same tactics that we're talking about right here. Okay. But it wasn't just Martin Luther King Jr. They have been doing this with leaders in the community since we've been here. And sometimes the things that they use are true, sometimes that they're not. They don't mind fabricating information, okay? Because the purpose is not to inform, the purpose is to destroy. So the enemy doesn't have to deal with truth. Truth has to be dealt with by those who are of the truth. But if you're not of the truth, you can use a lie just as easily as you use the truth, because the intent and the purpose is to destroy. All right. So that's where the whole thing about mudslinging comes in. There's a saying, if you throw mud against a wall, you can wipe the mud off, but the stain will stay. Okay. So in other words, even if you say something negative, it can be untrue, but it has already made a stain. There's also a marketing observation in marketing that for every for every negative idea, there has to be at least 6 or 7 positive ideas to balance it out. So one negative thing is more powerful than several positive things. And the enemy knows this. So that's how they operate. One of the other ways of operating is using a person that we may have respect for to lure us in to the enemy's camp. And that happened in Nehemiah chapter 6 as well. So when that man suggested that Nehemiah go into the temple and lock the door because he was going to be under attack, Nehemiah was able to see, because he was operating in the spirit, he was able to see that man was not for him, even though that man was one of his people. So he was able to discern that which is good from that which is evil. But the enemy will use people like that. As a matter of fact, in many cases, they start with people like that. Just about every organization in this country that has advocated for justice for people, and specifically for our people, whatever that organization is, it's been infiltrated by the enemies of justice and respect. So there are some that believe that the enemy in Martin Luther King Jr.'s camp was one of his close lieutenants. We certainly know that was the case with Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey. You can just go down the list. The Black Panthers. So when you got something that works, you keep working it. All right. So but they got these ideas. These ideas are as old as the human condition. So these things are not new, but they still work. All right. So when evil is at the center of what you do, you don't have to go by rules. You can do whatever works. And so that's what we're seeing here. But when you are in the will of the Most High, you will be able to be given the wisdom to tell the difference between that which is of the Most High and that which is not. And that's what happened when Nehemiah, when Nehemiah was told to go into the temple. And he said, I have no intention of doing that. That would not be what the Most High wants me doing. Okay. But the whole idea with all of these tactics is to magnify and utilize fear as that which would motivate a person or a group of people to do what you want them to do. And that was happening. So they were always under threat from their enemy. The enemy's desire and purpose was to engender fear so that they would stop building that wall, so that they would stop rebuilding that society. And that's, again, what's happening today as well. And then finally, I just talked about this, but it's not just people who are in your camp that will be used. It's people who are eating with you. It's people who are in your inner circle. If you remember, Yeshua had 70 disciples. He only had 12 apostles. And of those 12 apostles, one of them was a devil. One of them was the son of perdition. He's the one that was eating with Jesus right before he went out to betray him. Okay. So again, if that's true with Yeshua, you know it's true with the Most High's people. And that's what was going on with Nehemiah as well in Nehemiah chapter 6. So prominent people from your own people will be used. Now, the other thing about prominent people, the reason why they're so easily used is, as was the case there, they had figured out a way to work one side against the other. We talked about this in previous lessons as well. This is where the middlemen or women come in. Okay. So they know what the will and desire of your enemy is, and they know in at least some sense what your will and desire is when you are trying to do the will of the Most High. So they use that to their advantage because their purpose is to stay in power or to stay where they are and be able to benefit from the situation that has destroyed a whole people. And so even in this day's society, those people still exist in our community as well. Those who are in the will of the Most High can recognize those people. But that's why being in the will of the Most High is so important. Okay, so let's go a little bit further into the spiritual temple and its modern day parallels. The modern day, I was hesitating because I was going to show you these scriptures, but I'll just keep this slide up, and this will be the last thing that we talk about. So when it comes to what Nehemiah did, he was actually working on a physical wall with physical gates surrounding a physical temple with a real altar. Okay. In today's society, that is no longer a physical entity talking about the building of the Most High, the temple of the Most High. And that's what these scriptures are talking about. We've talked about the concept before, and these scriptures help us to see it. But even in Proverbs, which was in the Tanakh, the Most High always knew that Israel was to be a spiritual house. even though they had a physical manifestation. Remember, the physical manifestation of the temple was actually a manifestation of the spiritual temple that exists in heaven. Okay, so he always knew also that the spiritual house itself was and is Israel. Okay, it wasn't the bricks and the mortar and the cedar planks and all of the trappings of the temple. It was the house of Israel. Okay, and that house was to be a spiritual house. That house spiritually was to offer up sacrifices that were pleasing to the Most High, and those sacrifices had to do with bringing the rest of the world into relationship with the Most High, because that's the Most High's plan. That's the real gospel. Okay. And then we would look at Isaiah chapter 61, verse 6, where he actually says to the nation, not just to the priestly class of the nation, we are to be priest of Yahuwah. Okay. So the whole nation was to be priest, offering up a spiritual sacrifice. Romans 12:1 speaks specifically to what we would call the church now, where the church is encouraged in Romans chapter 12, verse 1. He says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, that you offer yourselves unto the Most High a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to the Most High, which is your reasonable service, or which is why you are here to serve. Okay. So Romans chapter 12, verse 1 tells the people of the Most High in modern times that we are to offer ourselves as that living sacrifice. We talked about that before as well. The sacrificial system, you had to have a live animal tied to the altar before the animal was actually slain. So what he's saying is we need to willingly bring ourselves to the altar, be slain, so that we offer up being slain. In other words, we give up our lives to serve the greater purpose that the Most High has for us, and that's what we are being beseeched to do. Romans chapter 15, verse 16 talks about this priestly service that we then, as the living sacrifice, are to perform. And that priestly service is the service of the gospel. The word gospel, although we've been taught that it means good news, actually it just means news. It really depends on the heart of the person whether that news is good or not. Okay, but the news that is good for the Most High's people is that He has made a way for us to be reunited with Him, and that's what the death, burial, and resurrection of Yeshua is all about. And then in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 9, he actually tells the Corinthian church, Shaul or Paul tells the Corinthian church, don't you know that you are the temple of the Most High, or you've been built up a spiritual house? So again, the notion is that the Most High's people are this temple. And just three more, and then we'll try to bring this together. And also in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16, he specifically says, we are the temple of Yahuwah, and the Holy Spirit is in us, both individually and collectively. So when we talk about the temple of the Most High in what is called the New Testament, the temple of the Most High are His people, which is why whether a physical temple is actually built in Jerusalem or not is theologically unimportant, because His temple is His people. And that comes up over and over again in the New Testament. In 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 16, again, he says very specifically, you are the temple of the living Elohim, or of the living God. The you being those who are hearing the message that the Apostle Paul is giving to them. And in essence, what he's telling them is, so since you are the temple, you need to act like the temple. Okay, you need to be what the temple is supposed to be. And after I do this last one, I'll go back and talk about some of these. 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 5 says it a different way, but the same thought. You also, talking about the believers, those who are of the kingdom of the Most High, you also are living stones or lively stones, and you're built up a spiritual house, and you offer spiritual sacrifices. So the world is to see the what we call the church, but it's actually the members of the kingdom of the Most High. The church just means the assembly of those who are called for a specific purpose. Okay, and so the purpose that we are called for is to be that spiritual house, which is the temple, which does contain the Holy Spirit, and the work that is done by and in and with the temple, the living stones, is to offer up spiritual sacrifices. The spiritual sacrifices have to do with us offering ourselves up for the service of the Most High. And the service is giving the message by thought, by word, by deed to those who don't have the message. That's our job. Okay. So the reason why the Most High has us focusing on these things, and the reason why the theme is repair the breach, go back and build, or go back and rebuild, is because what we call the church, or what the scriptures call the kingdom of the Most High, is in disarray. It's been overrun. We are our city has been taken over by devils, and he wants us to put it back the way that it's supposed to be. Now, again, this is a spiritual house, but once the spiritual house is put back together again, it will manifest itself in physical ways. And that's the whole purpose of this lesson. But first, as I keep saying, the purpose of this lesson for the entire year. We have work to do that's going to take time. But the first thing that we are to do is to get the vision for who we are as the people of the Most High. And as the people of the Most High, what our job is. The first thing we do in repentance, because we talked about this the last few times also, is to confess that we have been overrun, to confess that our enemy has won battles, is to confess that which he put in us to save us has actually been destroyed, and he had to leave because we kicked him out by our behavior and by our heart's desire, which is to be just like our enemies. So in order for us to do what the Most High wants us to do, we first have to go back and rebuild what he has given us to rebuild, which is his temple. And his temple is his people. And once the temple is built, then there have to be protection. There has to be protection. In other words, there has to be a wall around the purposes of the Most High, and you can only get in by certain gates. Everything else is to keep the enemy out, and the gates are to make sure that whoever comes up in there comes up by our permission and not by force. So he needs for us to rebuild. Now, all of this is relative to what is going on in the community right now. Right now, and I should say this too, right now, in certain parts of the community, lawlessness is prevailing. That is the equivalent of the temple being destroyed. That is the equivalent of the hedge of protection being breached. We have lawlessness from the outside and lawlessness from the inside. And we also have middlemen and women who are taking advantage of all of this, and they're making a killing. And they speak for us. They lead institutions that we are supposed to be leading. They have connections with people in the enemy's camp who make sure that we stay where we are. And they look just like us. The only way that they can be told, that you can tell who they are, is by what they do. And so that is the state of our community. Now, that's the middlemen, but we also have those who are lawless, who basically take what is not theirs, including lives, without any consequences, whether they have permission from the government or whether they don't. So all of that is going on, and the Most High is saying, all right, now it's time for me to come and redeem all of this, and you're going to be used to do it. So you have to start with the individual. You have to start with a small group of people, going back to where we should have never left in the first place, and rebuilding. All right. So that's what these lessons are about. And so what we see is that when we go back to do that, we have to be of the understanding that we're going into hostile territory. The idea that you can have a victory and then rest and kick back and things will be okay, that's not going to happen for a long time. There's too much that has been destroyed. There's too much work that has to be done. And that's why you only work with people who already have the vision. That's where you start. Okay. So the place that you start, as we had talked about before, is first as an individual and then in your individual families, so that your children are not the children who are practicing lawlessness, so that you're not working for an agency whose primary job is to make sure that your people stay in bondage. So you are doing that kind of work, and as you do that kind of work and retake control of your own households, then you can begin to branch off with other people who are doing the same thing that you're doing, because the Most High's vision has been given to more than just you. Okay, there are always going to be prophets. There are always going to be governors. There are always going to be people in positions of leadership. So leaders are a good thing, but we have to have the right leaders. The way that you know a person is the right leader is if they are operating in the will of the Most High. That's how you tell who is a leader and who is not. If they're not operating within the will of the Most High, do not follow them. As a matter of fact, you may have to actively make sure that you neutralize them, because they're in the way of the Most High's vision for his people. That would be true on the streets. That would be true in the organizations that we find ourselves in. It's certainly true in the educational realm. It's true in the political realm. It's true in the economic realm, because all of these things are going to play themselves out once we get the focus back where it's supposed to be, which is building this spiritual house. This spiritual house is for where we're living right now. It will go on in to eternity, but he wants us starting it right here, right now. This is a now vision. This is not a pie in the sky off in the future vision. This is for today. So this is the work that he wants his people to engage in today. Work on yourself first, work on your family immediately after that, or while you're working on yourself, and then find other people who are doing the same thing. Pretty soon, you will find a unified effort, which is what Nehemiah had. So when Nehemiah and them rolled back up into the land that was theirs in the first place, they rolled in power, and people had to respond to them, not vice versa. Their only response to the people around them is get out of the way and no, we're not coming to talk to you. We got work to do here. That's where the Most High's people are and should be in this day and time. So we give thanks again for Nehemiah chapter 6. We're going to look at several other chapters in Nehemiah, chapters 7, 8, etc. But the theme is always the same. What we will find, as I said, is that once we get on the path that the Most High has us, we'll look around and see the support system because he's already put it there. But if we don't see him, we can't see them. That is where the blessing is, seeing him first. And as we see him, he instructs us. He gives us the eyes to see and the ears to hear what we need to see and hear to do the work that he's given to us. We give thanks to the Father for the blessing of the word and the blessing of the lesson. The Father bless you and keep you. The Father make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Father lift up his countenance upon you and give you his shalom. I'll say